Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Super excited because we have both cohorts A and B on campus today, and our fifth graders are getting their end of the year carnival, which is going to be a really, really big day. And then in the afternoon, starting at about 12:30, we're going to be able to see all of our Los Alamitos High School seniors who are also Weaver alumni will be driving by in their car parade. And then tomorrow, so many of those seniors are going to be on campus. So we got a lot of stuff coming up here. I'm very excited because we have one of our Weaver alumni who's not actually a Los Al High School graduate, but at John F. Kennedy High School. We have Sophia Young, who will be leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And then continuing on with our Song for a Whale. We are getting towards the end. We have chapters 40 and 41 by Oaks principal, as well as Weaver's former principal, Mrs. Erin Kominsky. So let's get ready, let's get set, and let's go have an absolutely amazing day.
Good morning, Weaver. My name is Sophia Young, and I am a John F. Kennedy High School graduating senior and a Weaver alumni. In the fall, I hope to attend Cal State Long Beach for theater, but I am on the wait list, so my backup plan is to go to Cypress Community College for 2 years and then transfer to Cal State Long Beach for theater. My favorite memory at Weaver would probably be outdoor science school. That was probably one of the most fun weeks I've had in my entire life. I got to bunk with friends and learn new things that I previously didn't know. I want to give a huge thank you to my teachers. So thank you to Miss Peel, Miss Ta, Miss Lee, Dr. Arias, and Miss Enix. You guys helped me develop to be the person I am today, and I want to thank you for that. Now, I want you to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Please remove all hoods and caps. Put your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Have a good day.
Chapter 40. Since it might be our last night on the cruise, Grandma and I took our time standing out on the deck before going to bed. We probably wouldn't be able to fall asleep for a while anyway, thinking about our side trip to Lighthouse Bay. I'd never seen a night so dark. Wendell would have loved it. So many more stars than we could see at home. It looked like one of the glaciers had shattered onto the sky, dotting the blackness with shards of ice. I scanned for the unblinking brightness of Jupiter. It was hard to find in the star-crowded sky, and of course, it wouldn't be in the same place as when Wendell showed me. Or maybe it was that I was in a different place. Too much had changed since then. Sometimes it felt like I'd just left home, but I'd been away long enough for planets to shift in the sky. At the same time, things hadn't changed much at all. I was still so far away from the whale I'd set out to find. If I'd been at home right now, then I could have been on the Jacksons' balcony with Wendell, looking at Jupiter with him. Then I spotted it way off to the left, as clearly as if Wendell had been sitting there pointing it out to me. He was probably in bed asleep, but I liked the thought that maybe he was looking at Jupiter right then too. I hadn't planned to get online again, but I decided to send one more email. Dear Wendell, thinking of you because my odds of succeeding are astronomical. Get it? About that planet you want to find, it was kicked out of the solar system millions of years ago, right? So how do you know about it? I don't mean just you, but how does anyone know about it since it happened that long ago? Anyway, I was just thinking I'm kind of like that planet. I was on one path and something knocked me onto a new one. I'm still going. Iris. Benny walked with us to the exit when the ship docked in Cape Oliver. None of us said anything along the way. Grandma and I each had a small bag packed. If we didn't make it back before the ship left that afternoon, we'd have a change of clothes and our toothbrushes with us. We did pack our suitcases, even though we weren't going to haul them with us. If we had to meet the ship in San Francisco to pick up the rest of our things, we wouldn't want to have to take the time to pack. Before we left the room, I put the origami whale in the front of my pocket of my jeans for good luck. Hopefully we would make it back because I wasn't ready to say goodbye to Benny, but I had to go. A whale was pulling me off that ship and down the Pacific coast. I signed thank you to Benny. As we hugged, I realized I was still wearing the scarf she'd lent me. I reached to pull it off as I signed, yours. She shook her head and placed a hand on mine to stop me. Yours. Then she scribbled something on the notepad before handing it back to me. Good luck. Whatever happens, you made a great song. I squeezed her hand, then Grandma and I walked through the exit and onto the gangplank. Benny had told us how to get to the train from the ship, and pretty soon we found signs and a crowd to follow. A lot of cruise passengers were headed to the railway tour. After walking a few blocks, we saw a huge black train sitting on the tracks, steam billowing from the engine. It didn't look like trains I usually saw, but more old-fashioned, like something from a black and white movie. A man in a blue suit and a conductor's cap stood outside the train and waved everyone aboard. Grandma handed him our tickets, and we found seats near the front. I couldn't believe we were almost there. This was it. It seemed to take so long for the train to fill up and get going. I was ready to just go already and get to Blue 55 before he left the bay. Maybe he had already been there. I was afraid to check, but I had to find out if there was even a reason to go anywhere. I reminded myself even that whales can hear from so far away. Even if 55 had left the bay, he wouldn't have gone far. I'd play his song for him anyway. He'd be close enough to hear it and know that someone out there heard him and answered. So why didn't I feel better knowing that one way or another I'd play the song I'd made and he'd hear it? I thought back to what Tristan said when he reminded me that Blue 55 wasn't one of my radios. Maybe I wasn't doing this for 55. He thought I was trying to fix the whale, to make myself feel better. No, that wasn't it. He did have a song that no one else could tune into, but he didn't need fixing any more than I did. I pushed the doubts aside. Of course, I was doing this for him. When I took out my phone, I noticed there wasn't much of a charge left. The night before, I tested the speaker once more and left the phone plugged into it instead of plugging it into the charger. If I went through all of this just to have a dead phone ruin it, I'd never get over it. I turned off my phone to save whatever battery life was left and asked Grandma if I could check the map on hers. The tracker showed a blue dot blinking right near Lighthouse Bay and the time of his last recorded song just an hour ago. He'd been there soon if he kept swimming in the same direction, but would he stay? I was literally cutting my chances of meeting him down to the minute. My leg jiggled as I switched over to the sanctuary's website to check for news. Not much of an update. Just a "today is the day" post about how some of the staff was going out in the boat soon to catch up with 55 and tried to tag him. Before handing Grandma's phone back, I checked a new email that had come in. Wendell had replied to my message. Dear Iris, scientists figured out the other giant planet used to be there because of the effect it had on everything around it. The other planets and their moons would have different orbits if there hadn't been something else that size pulling on them. Our whole solar system would be different. We wouldn't have Jupiter that day you were at my house because it would be in another part of the sky. Even though that planet has been gone a long time and it's really far away now, it still affects the planets it used to share space with. Come back soon, Iris. It's not the same here without you. Wendell. The train shuddered and lurched forward, gradually picking up speed as we rolled down the tracks along the Oregon coast. I drummed my fingers on my thighs. This was it, almost the end of my journey. Later, when the train stopped at the halfway point, we'd be just a 10-minute shuttle ride from the sanctuary. I tried to tell myself that Blue 55 would be there at the bay or he wouldn't. There wasn't anything else I could do except show up. Still, I was nervous. I kept trying to get a view of the landscape ahead of us, hoping to see something that looked like a train stop. Grandma put a hand on my leg to stop it bouncing. I got up and moved to the passenger car closest to the engine to get a better view and to give my jittery legs something to do. The train climbed a hill and then we rounded over the top. A wooden building came into view. A man wearing a khaki shirt and pants waved from the front of the building as the train slowed to a stop. After we got off the train, Grandma asked the man where to catch the shuttle, and then we followed the path to the direction he pointed. Finally, we were almost there. Grandma took my hand and even ran a little, laughing. I'd have to think of some way to thank her for bringing me on the trip. Without her, it couldn't have happened. When we reached an area with shops and restaurants lining the streets, a blue sign on a pole pointed to the way the shuttle stopped. We were back to walking since Grandma was out of breath from the short run. We turned the corner to see a shuttle stop ahead of us and a shuttle rounding the corner driving away. I ran ahead to the bench to the stop sign to read the sign to its shuttle stop every 20 minutes. 20 more minutes, then a 10-minute ride? Blue 55 would probably be tagged by then, swimming away from the sanctuary. Train gone. I glanced around frantically like a shuttle map was going to appear. Maybe one of the stores knew the route and I could hurry to the next stop, wherever that was. Grandma pointed ahead of us and to the right. You can make it. How? Where? I'll meet you at the sanctuary. Run to that whale. Chapter 41. I tore through down Cape Oliver, weaving between the shops and restaurants and tourists. At a small red brick library, I leaned against the wall to catch my breath and check once more on Blue 55. My phone screen showed us the battery life with the tiniest sliver of red, like that line from Miss Khan's pen. This could ruin everything. Even if somehow made it to the sanctuary before Blue 55 left, I might not be able to play the song. All that work I put into it and all the distance I traveled to get there would be worthless because I hadn't plugged in my phone overnight. I'd never forgive myself for that. Nothing I can do about it now. I just have to get to the sanctuary and see what happened. Until then, I'd save whatever life the phone had left. I showed it into my sweatshirt pocket and turned it into a circle, trying to figure out which way to go. I'd run the way Grandma had pointed from the shuttle stop, but a straight shot wasn't possible with all the buildings in the way. The main street was on a diagonal, so I wasn't sure if I was even heading the right way or running parallel to where I had just been. I ran again in a direction that felt right while picturing the map that Benny had shown us. The sanctuary was farther down the coast. I knew that much. Finally, I found the beach, but couldn't see the train tracks from here to help me figure out where I was. What if I ran in the wrong direction? By the time I figured it out, I'd be even farther away from Blue 55. I touched the compass on my necklace, tracing the outline of the whale, wishing 55 could somehow show me how to reach him. Then I smacked myself on the forehead. What I needed was hanging right there around my neck. I laughed at myself as I unclasped my necklace and opened the compass. Mr. Gunner was right. It still worked. I'd navigate like people did for centuries. The compass needle pointed north. I turned so that north was at my back and ran. When I got close to the sanctuary, I didn't need a map or compass to tell me. I'd found the right place. I put the compass in my sweatshirt pocket next to my phone as I ran toward the red roof of a lighthouse. If I got there before the boat left, maybe I could convince them to change their minds about the song. I played it for them and showed them how easy it would be to just toss the speaker into the water. It could wait until after they tagged him so it wouldn't interfere with his song as they listened for him. It was okay that I couldn't get on the boat. I'd wait inside the building and watch the tagging on the video screens. Or I could stand outside and maybe get a glimpse of him as he swam in the bay. The important thing was that Blue 55 would hear his song. An orange boat that looked like the one in the video from last year when Andy tried to tag 55 was in the water. Ahead of me was a jetty with large rocks on either side like ones I'd seen in Galveston. That would get me further into the bay. After a few steps along the jetty, I slowed my pace. Waves crashed over the rocks and splashed onto the surface, slippery with seawater and algae. Twice I fell on the way to the end. The orange boat was ahead of me on the left, heading toward the sanctuary building. Was Blue 55 somewhere nearby? Or were they going back because the expedition had failed again? Or maybe they'd already tagged him. When they got close enough, I'd flag them down. I peeled off my sweatshirt and dropped it onto the jetty with my backpack. After the run, I needed to cool off. I started to wave as the boat got closer to me, and then I lowered my hand. Andy and the man behind the wheel were both smiling. Andy held the tagger pole, which no longer had a tracker at the end. The man took one hand off the wheel to give Andy a high five. They were celebrating. They tagged the whale Blue 55, the reason I was standing there. I'd left home to fly and cruise and ride a train and run to him, and he was gone. I tried to be happy for Andy and her team. They had set out to tag Blue 55 and they had done it, but I couldn't feel happy, not yet. For the first time since I started the trip, I cried. It wasn't the kind of cry that was one for one thing, but the kind that brings up everything sad or unfair that ever happened. It was impossible to miss someone you'd never met, but I did. I'd come all this way because I felt alone and thought Blue 55 did also, alone even in a crowd. And now he was swimming away from me. There I was, completely alone, standing in cold, wet clothes on a jetty. I thought back to what the captain had said during the fjord tour. something you have to know when it's time to give up and turn back. I shook my head and wiped my face. No, this couldn't be the end. I wasn't ready to give up yet. Blue 55 hadn't given up after all those decades of singing with no one answering him. If he had, I wouldn't know about him. I wouldn't have been on that cruise ship. There had to be something more to do, some hope to grab onto. Blue 55 wasn't so far away yet. I wouldn't see him up close, but wasn't I doing this for him? Maybe Tristan had been right all along. I was really doing this for myself. I was the only one who was lonely, and I wanted the whale to hear me. But right then, all I wanted was to let him know I heard him, that he'd connected to someone. The song I'd made wouldn't be exactly like his, but it was as close as I could get it. Everything I'd done would be worth it if just a few notes of the song touched his heart. I'd show him that there was at least one place in the ocean where he could find music like his own. Wherever he was, he'd still be close enough to hear his song. I grabbed the waterproof speaker from my backpack and plugged the wire into my phone. The red line showing the battery life was thinner than a hair. I tossed the thermos in the water for the song to play as long as it could. If I could catch sight of Blue 55 for a second, I'd have that to hang on to. I'd come for so much more, but at least I'd have something. A glimpse of his back or tail or breath right then would be like the hum of a radio static against my hand. Even if I didn't feel his music, I'd know I'd gotten really close. I scanned the waters all around the bay, back and forth frantic. Flat waters with the kind of stillness that must have been quiet. Just let me see you, just let me know that this wasn't all for nothing. No, not nothing. I touched the origami whale in my jeans pocket. At least I brought Grandma to the sea, and it washed away the drizzly November in her soul. She navigated her way through her grief. My weird, funny grandma, never content to stay in one place, who knew from the start that I should have the name of a whale. She never would be an ordinary grandma. She was the kind who would take your hand and join you on an adventure, who had to break free like those bubbles trapped under the glacial ice. Life would never be the same without Grandpa, but we'd be all right. Grandma knew that now too. And I'd made a good friend. I'd hope we make it back to the Siren before it left port, so I'd have more time with Benny. I missed seeing the whale, this whale I knew without even meeting him from the time I first learned his name. He'll never know that someone out there felt that way about him. Maybe he wouldn't have understood anyway. I would have liked to have told him, I'm sorry. I did everything I could. I'm here now. Then I saw it out in the waters ahead, a gray blue whale swimming toward me. Maybe it was another whale. There was no way to tell from where I stood on the dock. But then, after a column of spray from the blowspout, the whale's back arched. The crescent of the dorsal fin rose above the surface, followed by the broad fluke. There she blows. And there I jumped.